Hello, my name is James Arroyo, and welcome to Chapter 14, Organizing, Writing, and Outlining Our Speeches. Before, we've talked a little bit about some of the support, some of the information that we're collecting, research, and then how to transfer that into support. So we've talked about the meat of the speech. Now we're going to be discussing all of the main points, the sub points, and the overall organization, as well as introductions, conclusions, and those other parts of the speech that are not the meat or the content of the speech and are just ways to organize it for the audience to be better able to remember, understand, and recall that information. Let's dive right in. With mnemonic devices. Why is it that we organize this information? Well, we do this also with mnemonic devices. We organize information so that we're better able to remember and recall it. And if it's in strategic ways, then we are better able to remember it even better, such as acronyms like PEMDAS. Please excuse your dear aunt, my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. We also use rhymes, 30 days in September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31 except for February, which is 28. Also, we have chunking, and this is most reminiscent to how we organize our speeches. We chunk up information into labels, into ideas, and therefore we are better able to remember it because we only have to remember 3 things instead of 15 things. Chunking could potentially be like 714-781-4000 phone numbers. And there's lots of ways that we do this, but in general, we organize information for many reasons. To recall this information, an audience can better remember the main points of the speech when the listeners present them in a recognizable pattern. This could be from beginning to end, from left to right, or whatever. We'll talk about a lot of these other organizational patterns more. Also, it helps active listening. Effective organization engages listeners' attention and helps them to ignore distractions. And then also, there's a little bit of personal satisfaction involved because we feel like we are in the know a lot more because we already know more or less what's coming up because the organization has been previewed in the introduction. So this is going to be the skeleton of our speech. This is a joke. This is obviously going to be the actual skeleton of your speech, and I've no doubt, looks very similar to a lot of the organization that we've already been using with essays and other projects. That being said, with essays and written work, organization doesn't have to be as organized because guess what? You can reread stuff. With a speech, we do not have that luxury. We need it to be incredibly well organized. Otherwise, the listener may miss big parts of the speech. So, for example, the main points and thesis is one idea. The organization is important. Then main points would be subordinate to that, supporting that thesis. Organization improves clarity. That's one reason why organization is important. Then we have subpoints. In smaller speeches, this might be the support that we use. But for our informative, for our persuasive speeches, subpoints are going to act like main points to further break down the ideas so that we'll be better able to delve deeper into the information. But for example, subpoint, do you find what you need quickly in an organized room? This is that hypothetical scenario, or more like a comparison about, organization in speeches versus organization in a room. both help you find things quicker. Also, as quoted by inspiration.com, testimony, and then when I take notes, personal testimony. So all of this supports my organization, my claim that organization improves clarity, and then that the organization improves clarity main point supports my thesis. And with all of these main points and subpoints, and then support working together, you support your claims. Keeping in mind that main points, subpoints, when they act as those organizing factors, as well as thesis statements, the goal is to keep them short because when an idea is short, that means that it's clear and easily digestible. What ends up diminishing the organization is, let's say if the thesis is organization is important and then the organization improves clarity and improves retention is my main point, then I have two things to cover, and that diminishes the organization that I attempt to gain. But we can get even more organized than this, than just simple chunking it up. We have chronological organization, organization through time. So for example, the bicycle went from this to this, to this, to this, to this, to this, to this. One thing to keep in mind though, that even though there are 7 there, what I would do in a chronological speech is I would chunk it up into 3 different parts, because while yes, there are multiple components, multiple different types of bicycles, I would divide them and chunk them up so that people know exactly where we are. Also, we have categorical organization, also called topical. This is the natural divisions of how things just generally work out. We also have, for example, types of dogs. There are certain breeds, and therefore that sort of chunks up that information. What are 3 automatic subdivisions if we are going to talk about American government? Legislative, executive, judicial. What are 2 natural divisions that happen with most sports? Offense, defense. So there are many different organizational patterns that we can implement, and these 2, chronological and topical, are going to be the ones that we are going to be using most often. But there are other ones. Spatial is describing things in relationship to one another, such as color, size, and proximity. So red to yellow red to orange to yellow, or we may talk about top, middle, bottom. So in other words, in relation to each other. For example, first I may discuss this part of the painting, what that means, then this part of the painting, and what that means, then this part of the painting, and what that means. We also move into cause and effect. Cause and effect organization helps identify a situation and then discuss the effects that result from it. Or it can go the other way. What are the effects? And here was the cause of it. For example, what are the causes of children having phones, and what's the effect? Or if children having phones is the cause, what is the effect of that? And then lastly, we have problem solution organization. And this first lays out a problem and shows why it's serious. And in general, the goal of that is to show why it's serious and why it has to be dealt with immediately. And then emphasize the best ways to solve that problem. So we will be jumping into a problem cause solution organization. For example, what are the problems associated with global climate change? What are the causes? How does global climate change work? And then, how are we going to solve that? This will not only help us create exigence or a need to change with the problem, The cause will be the logic behind it of here's why we know this is the actual problem. Oh, sorry, these are the things that we need to solve to provide the solution, and then there's the solution. Now that we've talked about the body of the speech, this is the general organization of our speech, the main points and the subpoints. Those parts are just claims, single ideas that do not have an and are relatively short. The shorter the better with main points and subpoints. No more than a sentence, though. Sentence maximum, because when you have narrow ideas, then, because there are not as many words, then therefore it is a clear idea of what you're talking about. Now we talk about the introduction and the conclusion, and where organization can be very creative and support, and the body in general can be very creative. Introductions, conclusions are very formulaic. They have the same components and they have the same, and the reason why they have those same components is because every introduction has to greet the audience, grab the audience's attention, share what the topic is, show why this topic is significant to the audience, show why I am a credible source for this topic, and then preview the main points of your topic. And that is why every single introduction should have in some way these 6 category or components. Let's jump right in. First, we start with the greeting. This is very simple. Hi, how are you all doing today? Starting with a conversational tone and a warm smile helps build rapport. We all then have an attention device, and this is where we start getting into new things, where you could ask for a direct question. You can ask a question, either a direct question, how many people own an iPhone? Then we all raise our hands, or a rhetorical question where it just focuses on inward self-reflection. We also could refer to a recent historical event. The college tuition scandal was fairly recent, but if I was doing a speech on infectious diseases, I may discuss a certain infectious disease that tends to be going around right now. Also, make reference to the audience. I could then ask, in some of my interpersonal communication classes, I would say, who has a dollar? Then someone would raise their hand and I would come over and say, hey, can I have that? Yes. Okay. I put it in my pocket. Then I say, who has $5? Then someone else would raise their hand. I would take that $5. I'd put it in my pocket. Then I'd say, who has $20? Then they would ask $20 and I would take that. Then I wouldn't go any higher than that because, college students in general, from my own personal experience, don't tend to have a lot of money. So at that point, then I say thank you. Then I continue my lecture. About 2 to 3 more minutes after that, then I call back to it. Okay, let's talk about trust. First, trust is based in magnitude of trust. The person who gave me $1 doesn't have to trust me as much as the person who gave me $20. Also, that there's also a time element to trust, that the longer you have to trust, the less we feel. And then lastly, there is a relational component to trust. Me being a kind professor, I hope that someone would trust me with that money, not to mention the social roles that we have. Professor and student, obviously there has to be some trust there. And then I continue my lecture. Just kidding. I then give them back their money. I wouldn't be too cruel. But we can also help find a common, but this is a good way to capture the audience's attention, keep them with me, and then also would show what the topic is, because attention getting devices should still be aligned with the topic. But this one probably would be far too long for a 5 to 7 minute speech, or even a 6 to 9 minute speech. But we can make reference to the audience. You could also find common ground with the audience. Have you ever had an experience when dot dot dot? At that point, you are just gaining common ground, and there you go. Also, we could refer to the occasion as it being a historical event, and you could even begin with a quotation. You could also begin with a hypothetical situation. Imagine you have no financial worries, so on and so forth. Starting with a hypothetical can grab the audience's attention. You could also begin with a story. One time I was riding my bike. I was having a good time. I recently got a new road bike and it was amazing, but it didn't have suspension because it like has to stay on the road. And I was going super fast. It was awesome. And I decided to take a turn real fast and I slid. I hit a pothole. I bounced, I hit both of my brakes, front wheel went first, went over the handlebars, scraped up all over my arms and face, and I was a mess. What did I do the next day? I got back on my bike, showing that when we do experience failure, we have to jump back on that bike. By starting off with a story like that, it can grab the audience's attention. And then lastly, reveal a startling statistic. 80% of a company's future revenue comes from 20% of its existing customers. You can also use humor when appropriate. I may have already stated this joke, but I'm going to do it anyway. What is one nut? Wait, hold on one second. First of all, you should have practiced your jokes so that you are able to make sure that your delivery is good. But also, okay, let's go with the joke. One nut is chasing another nut, and one turns to the other and says, I'm a cashew. I'm funny. Anyway, also we could refer to previous speeches, things that I've said before. Also, you could refer to your personal interest in this topic, and then even using an analogy. This is also where we may have some overlap over audience engagement of that who has a dollar story that could act as an analogy. Then we need a topic revelation statement. A topic revelation statement needs a conversational voice, a time indicator today for the next few minutes, this afternoon, a communicating verb. I will teach, I will describe, I will argue, I will inform. Watch out for I will persuade, because at that point, the audience may just be on guard a little bit. Also using vibrant adjectives, philanthropic, necessary, dire. For example, if my topic is to stop the animal abuse of elephants in circuses, then I may say, for the next few minutes, I will argue that we should stop the dire mistreatment of elephants in circuses. And just like that, I have my topic revelation statement. Then, and by the way, I will use topic revelation statement and thesis interchangeably. Then we have a significant statement, 1 to 3 sentences that show the relative importance of the topic. Use personal language. Source citation can also be very effective with this. Personal testimony is effective because if I've already experienced it and you are identifying with me, then therefore you can understand why it would be a big deal for you as well. Also, statistics might be useful because it's showing that this big population has experienced it. Therefore, you may experience it as well. And then we have a credibility statement. In other words, it's to show that you're qualified. Show your personal relationship with the topic, prior experience with the topic, and avoid sounding boastful. If you do not have these things, are you just unable to do it? Not at all. What we then do is then we use source citation. We talk about here I found sources from databases and therefore showing your credibility. And then lastly, preview. You preview the main points. Keep it simple, keep it in the same order, beginning to end, and then you could even use things like first, second, third. First, I will discuss the ivory trade. Second, I'll talk about biology. And third, I'll discuss their mistreatment in circuses or whatever. If you're talking about the Revolutionary War, first I'll talk about the beginning. Second, I'll talk about the middle. Third, I'll talk about the end. But what you may want to do more often is first, I'll talk about the things leading up to the Revolutionary War. Second, I'll talk about the battles. And third, I'll talk about how it resolved. Boom. Now we move on to the conclusion. And just like the introduction, the conclusion has components that have to be there because we are wrapping up the points. So we first restate the topic or the purpose of your speech. I've just showed you this information that elephants have dire mistreatment in circuses. First, I've talked, and then review those main points. First, I've talked about how they are not fed. Then I've talked about how they are not sheltered. And lastly, I talked about how human intervention is so costly on the elephant's mental health. Then you tie back to the introduction. If I started off with something like, two cashews are chasing each other, one turns to the other and says, "I'm a cashew," then I may end the speech with something like, "I hope that this was a not so nutty experience." And nutty experience. Anyway, when I when you have these bookends where something that was called up at the very beginning is also called up at the end, what that does is that creates this feeling of finality, this feeling that we have closure on this topic, and that is pretty satisfying. Then we add in one more step in a persuasive speech. In a persuasive speech, we use a call to action, showing them here's what you have to do next. It shouldn't be so big that it's impossible to do or unreasonable to say you should do, but not so small that it doesn't solve the problem. Now we move on to transitions and signposts. This is within the body. This helps information flow from the audience, flow from point to point. So there's one between the introduction and the first main point, between the first main point and the second main point, between the second main point and the third main point, and then the third main point to the conclusion. It is, in general, reviewing and previewing. Every time it reviews and previews. The reason why is because we want to be sure that we are stating explicitly when we are moving from point to point, because it allows us then to understand, okay, here's where we are in the speech, and know exactly that we are at a different part in the speech so that we are never lost. For example, if I'm transferring from the points health benefits of apples to the health benefits of bananas, now that I've told you about the health benefits of apples, now I'm going to be talking about the health benefits of bananas. If I'm transferring from health benefits of running to the health benefits of meditation, first I've talked about the active means of being healthy. Now I'm going to be talking about the relaxing means of being healthy, one of which is meditation. And now I am on to the next point. Transitions are full sentences, whereas signposts are just simple, small verbal cues. They alert the audience where we are in the speech. They're things like first, second, third. They act like road signs of here's where you are. Small little note, here's where you are. Small little note, here's where you are. Then there are more signposts, obviously, that allow us to further talk about what's coming up if we are highlighting or emphasizing a point, or changing direction or creating a comparison, adding a similar point, being more specific, giving an example, acknowledging something and moving to a different point, or even following a line of reasoning. All of this signposts so that we understand what's coming up. Now we are going to move on to outlining. We've talked about the general ideas of organization and the things that we need in our speech. Now we're going to be talking about how to put that on paper, how to outline. I'm sure that I am not the only one, but when I was a student, I would start by writing. Just writing writing the speech, writing the essay, writing whatever I had to do, and I would inevitably have this experience, and I'm sure that you've had it as well, where you're going through and you're like, okay, wait a second. This actually doesn't really belong here. Maybe it belongs somewhere else. You know what? Actually, I think that this belongs here. Copy, paste. Okay, wait a second. Wait, there was something else that should have belonged here, but I don't remember exactly what it was. Well, you know what? Let me go try to find it and then spend the next the next like 5 minutes trying it and then give up and be like, you know what, this is so frustrating, I'm just going to work on Netflix is a very, very important activity that I have to do for class because of reasons. Outlining saves time, it saves sanity, and it also makes the speech or essays better. So we want to be sure that we are doing outlining every single time. What you will be able to do in this speech, in this after you learn this method of outlining, what you will be able to do is take all of the information that you have, exactly, take out all the symbolization and indentation, make the main points paragraphs, or maybe just make the subpoints paragraphs, depending on the size. And then you have a very, very good essay, a very well organized and researched and supported essay. So there is application of this beyond public speaking. What is this? How do you not know? It's all the information is here. Okay, you know what? How about I give you a little bit more? How about I try to divide my points up a little bit more? I maybe, that way you'll be able to better understand it. Okay, do you know what it is now? But all of the information is there. I've given you all the information. How can you not understand what this is? Okay, let me break it up a little bit more to show that we better understand it. There, do we understand what it is now? Great. But but let's even get even more specific because maybe there are some people who may not still know what this is. So, there we go. It's Mario. This is why we have clear subdivision and clear main points, subpoints, and then support, breaking up our ideas instead of having within all of our ideas within one main point and just no subpoints. We get to here. Versus the more we make those points, those main points, those subpoints narrow, it makes a much clearer picture. In the same way, uh, but let's just now talk about why we outline. First, it helps you be organized, keeps the information orderly and accessible. The main points are the furthest to the left, and subpoints or then the further we go to the right, the more subordinate those points are. So in other words, it keeps it clear and organized that everything on this line are main points. Everything on this line are subpoints, and everything on this line are support. So it helps us stay organized. Then it also checks for the logical progression of ideas. When we have a main point, then we see what points are below it. what things are supporting it. But there should be more than one subpoint per main point. Then we also have practicing the delivery of our speech. These outlines can even help us deliver our speeches and practice them. You won't be reading from an outline word for word. Instead, you'll be having a delivery outline that you will be able to look at for a split second and then be back to where you're talking about. Is this easy to understand? This is very much like that first Mario image. Then, as we break things up further, it allows us to better understand this information. First, we talk about a preparation outline. This is what an outline is um, before all of the other stuff. This is the very first step, but overall, we start with a working outline, which is just the bare essentials, the main ideas, without any support. That's understandable just to get our bearings. But then we eventually, inevitably, get to the preparation outline. And this is what I expect to have for the first draft as well as the final draft of your outline. It's more detailed, used to identify and organize your main ideas, list supporting material in full sentences, because if they are not in full sentences, then we may not know exactly what you're talking about. Also, state the specific purpose of your speech. Identify the central idea. Label introduction, body, and conclusion, because if we don't know what part we are on, then that will hurt our understanding. Also use a consistent pattern of symbolization and indentation, that we have I on capital I on this row, and then capital A on this row, then let's say lowercase I on this row, then A lowercase letters on this row, etc., etc., etc. So that allows us to better understand it. Whereas if it's like here and then we go all the way around, then we go all the way back to here, then that's going to be just very sloppy and not going to look very good. Next, state the main points and subpoints in full sentences. Label internal transitions and internal previews. Attach a bibliography, and then give your speech a title. All of this is within a preparation outline. Next, we move on to speaking outline. So once we have this big document, this 3, 4, 5 page document, at that point, then we focus it, we narrow it, because once we already know information, do we need a script? Not necessarily. Instead, we may just need little reminders of what this thing was that I just researched. That is the beauty of a speaking outline. It's less detailed, used as a delivery aid, usually consists of keywords or phrases. So everything, the main points, the subpoints, the support, all gets narrowed down into 3 to 5 words, maybe 7, or even keywords, which is just 1 or 2 words. That allows me to, instead of going reading, look up, instead it's boom, and I already know what I'm talking about. Also, it matches the structure of the preparation outline, because if the organization of the preparation outline was structured, then we can transfer that structure to our speech. We're more or less trying to give the same speech as the preparation outline, except in a way that is more authentic and not reading from the script. Also match the outline as match the outline as brief as possible, single words and small phrases, shortened introduction and conclusion. Add those transitions and supporting material, but again in key phrases. Do not include specific purpose statement at the top of the delivery outline, because there's no need for it really. And the guidelines in general Oh, sorry, one last thing. How is he holding the note card, and is that good? No. In fact, instead of holding a note card, use a bigger paper for this. Instead of holding a note card like this, you should be holding it like this. Because what will end up happening is you want to be sure that if you are holding it vertically, then it is covered by your hand and therefore you'll be able to see it more. Also, keeping in mind that if it's small keywords or phrases, you'll probably only need space for one or two words. And a vertical note card will maximize space available. Now we move on to the guidelines. So in general, think of the working outline or the preparation outline like the big bomber, which is unwieldy and huge and has all the information, whereas speaking outlines are like that fighter jet. But make sure that it follows the visual framework. Make sure that the outline is legible so that you can actually read it. Keep the outline as brief as possible, and even give yourself cues for delivering in your speech. Some good things to put in there is take a breath here. Um, use a hand gesture here. Pause here. All of those things allow us to better understand what you're talking about. But also, it allows me to be like, okay, now I know where we are in the speech. And now I'm going to show you how to outline your organization.